Birmingham, Ala. Destiny Clark, a transgender woman and Alabama native, couldn't bear the thought of going to Doug Jones's election night party and being there when he lost. So instead, she watched the unimaginable unfold Tuesday night at home, in front of the TV. "It was amazing," she said, recalling the moment when Mr. Jones pulled ahead of Roy S. Moore in the Senate race, and stayed there. I jumped for joy, and my dogs looked at me like I was crazy. Tears of joy were running down my face. But by week's end, the ecstatic moment had faded to a more tempered, pragmatic view of the future of progressives, Democrats, and others usually left on the sidelines in one of the nation's most conservative states. "It can happen," Ms. Clark, 33, the president of the rights group Central Alabama Pride, said of a Democratic resurgence. "It's just going to take a lot of work." For liberals in Alabama this week, witnessing Mr. Jones's improbable victory over Mr. Moore, an unabashed Islamophobe who has said that America was great during slavery days, speaks of sodomy as a plague on the national character, and has declared the transgenders don't have rights, unleashed an explosion of joy that echoed the civil rights victories of the state's near mythic past. But it was leavened with an understanding that the win may have done little, for now, to change the beneath the underdog status of Democrats in a deep South state still under near total Republican control. "I don't think we're out dancing in the streets saying this is a totally new day," said Jim Folsom Jr., who was Alabama governor from 1993 to 1995, when Democrats were near the end of their historic dominance of Alabama politics. "We're all realistic enough to know that party identification leans heavily Republican, and probably will for the foreseeable future. Still," he said, "Democrats have to start somewhere. A lot of those more urban, moderate-leaning to liberal-leaning Republicans who voted Democratic," he said, "now they've discovered they can do it, and the world didn't come to an end." It is a bittersweet place that Alabama liberals find themselves in as they watch the way Mr. Jones's victory has given their compatriots around the country a sense of momentum. They are well aware that Mr. Jones's victory, by 1.5 percentage points, could be explained in part by the conservatives who stayed home because they were put off by Mr. Moore's extremism, and by the allegations of improper relations with teenage girls that turned Mr. Moore from a deeply flawed candidate to a toxic one. And they know that the ad hoc coalition that supported Mr. Jones may be difficult to reproduce when the next opponent is less polarizing. Catherine Ross of Mobile, who works in a retail store, was among those Republicans who voted for Mr. Jones because she thought Mr. Moore reinforced the state's reputation for intolerance. "She found it embarrassing. I'd watch the Today Show every morning and hear them talk about us," said Ms. Ross, 46. "It's like I wanted to yell, 'We're not like this.' I don't want people to come here and think they'd be offended. I want businesses to feel like they can come here." But acknowledging those realities has not fully squelched the optimism that has surged among many of Mr. Jones's supporters, many of them far from Alabama stereotypes. Zenat Islam, 21, a senior at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, moved to Alabama from Pennsylvania in 2010. A Muslim of Pakistani heritage, Ms. Islam has experienced moments of discrimination here. But she mostly spoke about a place that was casually multicultural and surprisingly tolerant, even loving. That, she said, was the Alabama that won on Tuesday night. "It shows that the change is happening, the change I really want to see," she said. "Before I moved here I was so concerned that I was going to move to this really racist state, Mom," what am I going to do? But I feel like this place has opened so many different doors. Southern hospitality, that's really real. I love it. Bryant K. Oden, 37, said he viewed Mr. Jones's victory as part of a larger narrative of healing and progress that he wanted to be a part of when he moved back to Alabama in 2010. Mr. Oden, a radio producer and on-air personality, returned to his native state, one of the nation's poorest, from the West Coast in 2010, inspired by then-President Barack Obama's mantra, "We are the change we seek." Mr. Oden has been volunteering in an after-school program to help teach students to write computer code. Mr. Oden said that the politics of the state, like his volunteer work, would not create overnight change. But Mr. Jones's win had given him hope. "When you're dealing with the bureaucracy of government, it never moves fast," he said. "It's about educating people about the process and continuing to have the long game in mind. No one knows how long it might be, given the scope of Republican dominance here." Gallup ranks Alabama among the most conservative states in the nation. Republicans control all of Alabama's other statewide offices, and have occupied the governor's mansion since 2003. And after Republicans won control of both legislative houses in 2010, the first time in 136 years, part of white Southerners' broader shift away from the Democratic Party, lawmakers tried to redraw state district maps to what critics called the Republicans' lopsided favor. Republicans already controlled Alabama's federal delegation, and Mr. Jones, in winning on Tuesday night, actually lost in 6 of the state's 7 congressional districts. Since Republicans' consolidation of power, the party has been rocked by one high-profile scandal after another, including one that led to the resignation of Gov. Robert Bentley, who pleaded guilty to 2 misdemeanor charges and was threatened with impeachment after an investigation of his relationship with a close aide. But there is little evidence that Democrats have benefited. "It's easy to get re-elected in Alabama," said State Senator Dick Brubaker, a Republican whose district includes parts of 3 counties in the vicinity of Montgomery, and who did not vote for Mr. Moore. "What those people want from government is to be left alone. And if you leave them alone and don't raise their taxes, they'll continue to re-elect you." The state Democratic Party, meanwhile, has come in for sharp criticism from many Democrats themselves. The organization has been rocked by money troubles and infighting, and during the campaign, Mr. Jones's campaign manager, Wade Perry, said the state party had given the campaign absolutely no help, a charge refuted by its chairwoman, Nancy Worley. Mr. Jones's robust and well-funded Get Out the Vote effort has yielded a trove of up-to-date information about likely Democratic voters, but some Democrats now wonder if the state party is competent enough to know how to use it in future races. "The party is an organizational flop, and there's nothing there," said Don Siegelman, a former Democratic governor who created disappointments of his own when he went to prison in a corruption scandal. "The party has been dysfunctional and been of little or no value to candidates." Birmingham, Alabama's largest city, remains one reliable stronghold of Democratic power, and a source of hope for the party's future after voters, somewhat surprisingly, chose as mayor a 36-year-old lawyer, Randall Woodfin, over the 68-year-old incumbent, William A. Bell Sr. Daniel DeRizzo, the field and operations director for the Woodfin campaign, said the race was won with a reliance on new technology that allowed for the pinpointing of likely voters, and with a coalition that included blacks and white millennials. Mr. DeRizzo, 25, said it was a base that state Democrats could build from. Our economic message should resonate with rural voters, he said. We haven't been able to get that message across for years. But Mr. DeRizzo said he was unsure how to get that message through to rural voters who are also passionate about gun rights and opposition to abortion. I honestly don't know the solution to how to break through those barriers, he said. I mean, that's something we have to do as a party, as a whole. Much like many other parts of the South, the progressive vision of the future has arrived here, though only in spots. In downtown Birmingham, a half-block of 3rd Avenue includes a Japanese gastropub, a company called Covalence that promises coding bootcamp and career-altering education, and a branch of the elegant cafe chain, Revelator Coffee. Jana Stevens, 30, a Jones voter, was sitting on the Revelator's sofa Thursday night, her body covered in runic tattoos. She talked about her taste in literature, which runs to high modernism, Joyce, Eliot, the Alabama conservatism she grew up with but moved away from, and her glass-half-empty view of Mr. Moore's defeat. He was rejected, but it was by a small margin, she said. I think we still have a ways to go.